Hello and welcome to the Ogden Potter's House podcast. In this episode, we get to go through the story, the journey, and the testimony of Monica Berry. As we speak currently, Sister Monica is assistant pastoring the Ogden congregation with her husband, Pastor Garrett Berry. But before they were ever in Ogden, they pastored in various other places throughout the world. Tucson, Arizona, Provo, Utah, but eventually, along their journey, they were missionaries in Shanghai, China. We unpack a lot and more in this conversation, but ultimately, open your hearts, open your ears, and enjoy the testimony of Monica Berry.
I want to say thank you just for the fact that you took the time to come here and just to be a part of it. But let's just take me through the very beginning. Tell me a little bit of what your upbringing was like, because I don't really know much just from being new to your family. I've heard little bits and pieces from you, from my wife, and sometimes even from Pastor Berry, but what was your upbringing like?
That's a tough question. It was good. I think probably pretty similar to yours. I grew up in church. You already know Pastor Olson dedicated me.
That's cool. When you told me that the first time, I was like, that's sick. Like, I don't know. I'm always confident in like telling people because of the reputation that some of our fellowship leaders have had. Like, Pastor Glenn Cluck baptized me. And it's such a blessing. And so the fact that Pastor Mark Olson dedicated you, that's super cool.
It is pretty cool. I like to share that because it's just pretty awesome. What's trippy is when I was born, my mom had just got saved. When she got pregnant with me. So right at the same time as my parents came to the fellowship, I was born. And then some 18 years later, when I got married, my parents ended up not in the fellowship anymore.
Oh, wow. So what did your parents do, like, before coming to the fellowship? Like, work? What were they like? Do you remember?
My dad was in the military, and he had been overseas in Germany, and my older sister was born there, and he had gotten saved there and started going to church. But my mom was Catholic, but she wasn't really a Catholic. She wasn't a good Catholic. But she told my dad that she was born a Catholic, she was gonna die a Catholic, she was never gonna become a Christian. And so she used to just like to drink, and my dad was trying to serve God by himself, and it just wasn't working. Their marriage was a mess. And then he got transferred to Arizona, and where I was born. And they got a flyer for a revival from the Potter's House.
Wow.
And they went, and my mom got saved.
That's really cool. How many siblings do you have? Like, I know you have some brothers.
I have one brother.
Oh, one brother.
And 3 sisters. So there's 5 of us.
And so, what do you remember about church growing up, being a church kid?
I remember falling asleep under the chairs.
Yeah. Do you remember like the early days of Pastor Olson's ministry, or was...
No, we went through several pastors. He wasn't there very long before he went to the Philippines, and he moved on. We went through a lot of pastors.
Any there. Notable that are still around to this day?
Pastors?
Yeah, like that you were under, or that you just grew up hearing as a church kid.
The Goodings. The Goodings were there for a little bit. John Gooding and Esther Gooding.
Oh, dang.
And I've always liked them. And then Mark and Michelle Alston was our pastor. And Tom and Terry Sawyer. Tom and Betty Quinlan, which Tom Quinlan pioneered this church here in Ogden. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So just growing up, going to church, your parents bringing you. Tell me like a little bit about yourself were you a good, church kid? Were you rebellious? Were you in between?
I was very shy.
Yeah.
And quiet. My mom would answer for me if people talked to me. Like if anybody talked to me, my mom would answer for me.
Oh dang!
And
it was that bad?
Yeah, I was that shy, and I would just stay by her, like all the time. Like I was like right there by her. I would sit by her. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that I started like, kind of. I was just more rebellious in my heart, not necessarily outward rebellion. I was a good girl.
Yeah, that's good. I know it's tough for church kids and in general just to serve God and be quote good, because it's something that's like they have no choice in it. Do you have any good childhood stories or things that just come to mind when someone asks, like, childhood?
Childhood. I remember my dad pastored in Bisbee, Arizona for a little bit, and just being little and being in Bisbee, and we were just like hippie kids exploring like old town Bisbee, and we would me and my brother would just like run the streets and do what we wanted.
Yeah.
So those were good memories while my dad was working and pastoring. But yeah.
That's good. How long was your dad a pastor?
He pastored for 2 years.
So, growing up and things like that, eventually, you came to the age where, you were able to court and date and things like that. I want to know eventually, like how Pastor Barry came into the picture. Like, how did that come to be? Could you kind of take us through how you met your husband?
Well, he came to the church, but he was 3 years older than me, and we had a ton of youth. And there was girls that were more close to his age. So I didn't even like think that we would ever, like it wasn't even a thought in my mind that we would ever even like each other. Because he came in and he was like a military guy, and all the girls were like on him, like,
oh, dang.
I don't know. I was like, okay. But, and I just let it be. And like I said, I was really shy.
Were you involved in the church at the time, like in any ministry?
Just a little bit. I wasn't like super, because I was shy. I didn't like go out of my way to do stuff. But he said that he started to notice me when we did a haunted house and we were in it together. We weren't in the same scene or anything, but we were just there. And he just the girls had already moved on and decided they liked other guys. And so he was kind of free, I guess.
He lost his 15 seconds of fame. Just playing. But so how did that come about? Did he, first, pursue interest, or was it you?
No, I didn't even talk to him at the time. We hadn't even really had a conversation ever. He was just in church serving and doing stuff, and I was there doing my own thing, I guess. And he talked to our pastor, he talked to my dad, and then one Sunday afternoon he came knocking at the door and asked for me. I was like, it took me by surprise. I didn't expect him, but there had been rumors going around that he was going to ask me to court or date or whatever you want to call it. And so I knew it was coming, but I wasn't like super, super interested, I guess.
Yeah.
But I didn't have anything else going. So I was like, okay.
So that kind of leads into another question. We have subscribers that subscribe to the show, that pay a monthly subscription, but they also get to be a part of the interviews. One of the questions that someone sent in was, what was it about Pastor Barry that made you confident in saying yes to court and eventually marry him?
He was a good guy. I knew he loved God, and he gave himself to everything that he did. I had known him for 2 years already. not like one-on-one, but I had seen him and watched him, and all the girls that chased him, and all the parents that wanted him to date their daughter, try to hook him up. But he was just a good guy. He was in the military. He had a solid job. He was just a solid guy. So it was easy for me to say yes to talking and courting. And then once, he was pursuing me, then that was it. That was it for me.
You're sold.
Yeah. But what's interesting was I think our pastor at the time didn't. He asked me a question. You know how you have counseling with pastor?
Yeah.
We did that too. And he's like, well, he had given me words about being a pastor's wife and stuff. And I had gotten words through the years about being a pastor's wife. And he asked me, he's like, well, what if he's not a pastor material?
Oh, wow.
Do you still want to marry him? But I already knew that he would be a pastor. Like, it was not even a question in my mind. So I'm like, I just told him, yeah, I think so.
That's really, really cool. So what year did you guys eventually get married?
In 2000.
2000. That's easy to remember.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the very beginning of the,
We started talking or courting in November. And then by December, he had asked me to marry him.
Wow.
And then in June the following year, which was 2000, I graduated, turned 18, and got married.
Dang. So when was it that you guys first took over your first pioneer work?
We pioneered in Tucson first in 2000.
2005?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you describe those first few years of just simply being a pastor's wife when it comes to pioneering?
It was good and hard at the same time, because we fought together, to establish a church and a congregation. We had good times together. It's a lot of good memories, and it's a lot of I remember a lot of struggle, but it was a good kind of struggle. It's it hurt so good.
Yeah. Is there any in particular that you could kind of tell us and maybe possibly share how you overcame the struggles and things that you faced pioneering?
One of the things that was huge was my kids were always, I think, priority in my life, and I think the devil knew that, and that's where I felt like all the attacks were. But I finally just said in my mind, no matter what happens, I'm going to serve God. No matter what happens to my kids, no matter what happens in life, I'm not going to turn away. And so I just told the devil, do what you want. But it was hard because Abby's arm kept popping out of place. Josiah and Abby drank Melaleuca oil. We had to take him to the hospital, and things kept happening. She hit her head, and blood was everywhere, and just one thing after another with the kids. And they were so little; they were just 2 and 3. And when we first started pioneering, and it's just okay, this is enough. This is stupid. And I just really just got mad at the devil, and I was like, it doesn't matter what you're gonna do. I'm not gonna quit.
Yeah, that's so crazy because honestly, when I look and I really pay attention to just the dynamics of your family, and one thing that I notice is that everybody's saved, and one thing that also fascinates me and blows my mind is that your kids never backslid. They never left the church. They never
maybe just in their heart.
Yeah, maybe just in their heart, but nothing to where myself and others have done, where they completely left the fellowship, left the congregation, left any contact with, and that just is a testament of what your example and ministry has been.
Honestly, is just the grace of God and lots of prayers. Really, it's just the grace of God. I can't take any glory for that.
Yeah. So one question that someone asked was, how has ministry and being a pastor's wife shaped your mothership?
I think that my motherhood shaped me as a pastor's wife, to learn to care and to give of myself and to sacrifice. I think it was motherhood that helped me to be better.
Yeah. Is that the right verbiage? Motherhood, mothership. That's what they said. But what do you think about, what are some ways that you think that a pastor's wife can support their husband as the role as the pastor? Or what were some ways that like that, worked for you, that helped you to support your husband and his role and his job?
Mostly just being a wife. When I struggle like with where's finding my place, like what should I do, how could I help, and sometimes you think you should just do so much in the church and do this and do that, but when it all comes down to it, I always have to remind myself all I need to do is be his wife, to take care of my home, to take care of my kids, to take care of my family, and make sure that our home is where he wants to come home to, because that's his sanctuary. That's where he could just finally just be relaxed and take off his shoes and rest. Mm-hmm. So when I struggle with all that, I just have to remind myself, like, I just need to be his wife. There's nothing else. I don't have to do anything else. Yeah. That's my main ministry, is to be his wife.
Yeah, that's good. And so just to kind of go back to the perspective and lens of when you guys were pioneering in Tucson, is there any way you could describe or take us through what, a day in the life was like, or even just like, those weeks of, what was it like, pioneering, outreaching, to services, to fruit, things like that?
It was wild. It was hot in Tucson. The kids were little. It was just us for a while before we actually locked in converts. But we would just be out there, faithful, believing God. It was hard because my husband was working a full-time job, pioneering, which is another full-time job. But we gave ourselves to it. And we got support from our mother church. They came and outreached for us, sent bands and impact teams.
How helpful were those, just support from surrounding churches?
They were probably everything. They really helped. It was, in those times where we saw people come in and lock in and serve God. Most of the fruit that we saw wasn't something like, it wasn't ours. And I think God did that on purpose. We couldn't take any glory for it. It was like, so-and-so, told them about our church, so they came out and visited, or they had heard about our church from somewhere else, or we even had somebody find a flyer on the ground at the grocery store and they came.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So, it's just like, it was converts from other people, and we could never take, that was, they got saved because I witnessed to them, or I, spent the time. It was like, we were spending time with people and like trying to lock people in, but it wasn't those people that stayed. It was from other places.
Yeah. So I always hear, I think even Pastor Barry said this to the men at one point, or he mentioned it. It's just like a quote that's said constantly around the fellowship. And that's, the first couple people that come to your church are going to be like weirdos and psychos and things like that. How did you deal with that? Like when people like the weird cat people,
oh my gosh,
would come to the church, but that was the only person in service type of thing.
He would still preach. He would still do all the things, but it was just, I'm sure you probably heard the story before where this new convert like took Abby to Circle K, which is a convenience store like Maverick, which was like right next to the church, but we couldn't find her. Oh, and we were tripping out like, where's Abby? Where'd Abby go? And
how old was she?
2.
Oh no.
It was like, yeah, little 2-year-old. Just, she came back all happy and I was freaking out. She had a lollipop and she was just, she was totally fine, but the lady like just took her without even asking permission. She was a new convert,
Oh, no.
and she had like you could see people that have been on drugs. You could tell she was an addict, and it was just like, oh my gosh. My husband yelled at her, don't ever do that again.
I remember Pastor Barry told me this story of this little girl that would come to the church, and every time he was preaching or like doing announcements like, hey man, we want to lift this up in prayer, she would walk up and kick him in the shin.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Stuff like that. It's just, I can't help but laugh, but it's really true. Like, sometimes you just have to love people because that's the only people you got.
Yeah.
So how long did you guys actually stay in Tucson?
4.5 years.
4.5 years. And then what was after that?
We went back to our mother church for redirection for a few years, and then we ended up in Provo.
Dang, that's crazy. That's where it all starts to connect to.
Yeah.
I want to wait till I get there, but was redirection more of like did it feel like almost like a failure, or was it just more like relief, or what did it feel like to you guys as a couple?
It was definitely hard. It's not like what you think it is, because when you're out there pioneering and it's a struggle and it's lonely, it's never what you think it is. Like, it's not going to be the same as when you left, because you're a different person. God has done things in you, changed you, and you don't even realize that the changes happened. But going back for redirection was totally different. We did it with a good heart, and we were determined to be a help to our pastor, and go back out as soon as we could.
That's good. Do you remember the actual year that you guys came to Provo, Utah?
I want to say it was 2013.
Dang. It's crazy. Like, it feels so nostalgic to talk about that time period, because I actually remember I was on some of the first original couple of impact teams. I remember first meeting Pastor Barry. I remember first, kind of being introduced to you guys as a family.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I have so many. I think there was 2 specific impact teams that I went to, and I just got some funny stories. But it's awesome. Anything notable that comes to mind when it comes to the work in Provo, Utah?
I think we struggled with that one a little bit more. That one, I think, felt more like a failure to us. Because when we left Tucson, we left a solid church.
Yeah.
But when we left Provo, it was like there was people that were just not quite so faithful, and that one felt like a failure. But I worked through it, and I saw later, what God had done, not because those very people that were not quite faithful are still in the church there today. And so, whatever, God did in their lives stuck. And we had a good learning experience, and we learned different things, and God helped us.
Yeah.
And we came into Ogden. And so it all worked out.
That's so cool. So before we talk about that, the transition into the Ogden congregation, this is a question that I wrote down because we're getting close to conference time. Churches are going to be launched. New couples, it'll be their first time pioneering. What's a piece of advice that you can give to people either that will pioneer their first work, they're about to be launched, they're packing their bags, or right now they're currently pioneering their first work, they're experiencing those struggles, things like that. What's a piece of advice that you would say to them?
Just that it is a struggle. It is lonely. It is tough. You go through some of the toughest things being out there, but it's not because what you're doing isn't working, because you don't see fruit right away all the time. You don't always see what you want to see or what you expect to see, but it doesn't mean that God's not moving. And and pioneering is one of the most sacred things I think you could do, because it's the beginning and it seems like nothing's happening, and it seems like everything is just slow, and you're just going through molasses, and you're just going through the motion, and sometimes you don't even feel saved. But I really believe that the devil really attacks pastors' wives that are out there, because it is very sacred work. It is very holy, that work that you don't understand until you're out there. And I really believe that God's grace is on their lives, and if they were just to pray and seek God and just rely on God, that they would see breakthrough.
Amen. So now let's talk about the transition into the Ogden congregation. I don't know why I just get like so excited, because I know all this part, so it's exciting to.
It's because you met Abby.
Yeah, I come into the story. No, we can talk about that too if you want, but just the beginning. What was it like coming into a congregation that is, it's not home?
It didn't feel like it wasn't home at all. The Ogden congregation is the best. Like, they were so welcoming. I know it's like I could get emotional about it, but the Ogden congregation is the best at welcoming people. Nobody that ever gets sent out and comes back for redirection can ever say that they felt like uncomfortable, because nobody makes them feel that way except for themselves, because pastor is so gracious, and it just bleeds into the congregation, and everybody was so welcoming, and it was a blessing for us. I really felt like God it was just a whole nother dimension that opened up, and it was a blessing.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because when you bring light to it, it honestly makes me even realize certain things, like just the simple fact that we call Pastor and Mama Ceci like our, spiritual father, spiritual mother.
Mm-hmm.
They treat the church like they're, one big family, like they're all their kids, and it's all love, and it's really tangible in our congregation. So you guys came into Ogden. Do you remember the year?
We came here in 2016 or 17.
Yeah.
One of those years.
Yeah. It's funny because I remember like the actual first service you guys came. I remember Pastor Martinez. He made like a little mini like announcement. It was when everybody's like at the altar, like, oh, by the way, meet the new family.
It was Anthony and Rosemary's wedding.
Oh, no way. I don't remember that part.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
I remember.
That's crazy.
Do you remember? You don't remember?
I just remember everybody being at the altar, and then Pastor says like, oh, by the way, Berry family.
I'm sure it was a surprise to everybody. Like, what? Why are they coming here?
Yeah. And so then you guys started to eventually, rise up in the Ogden congregation, and eventually now it's like to the point where you guys are assistant pastor's wife of the congregation. It's
wild.
Do you ever like think back in just hindsight, and does it ever just blow your mind what God's done through
all the time,
your life and through your ministry?
Seriously, all the time. I can't sometimes even believe what God has allowed us to be able to be a part of, and it's just overwhelming.
Yeah. Do you think it's like, good for us as Christians, or even, pastors' wives and pastors, just to every once in a while, like, count our blessings and really reflect on what God has done throughout each year, throughout each trial, and, because sometimes I feel like we can get so caught up in the moment of,
For sure.
things suck now, but throughout the whole time, God was moving.
Yeah. we don't always see it until later, but I think it's even important when we eventually do see it to recognize what God has done. But yeah, just recently when we were in China, I was just like brought to tears sitting there in the service, and all these Chinese people are worshiping God together. And, you know, the work that Pastor Austin and Tabby did is just a solid foundation of a congregation that I got to be a part of. And just what a blessing it really is.
Do you think that was a little different, stepping into that, you know, eventually being launched overseas, you know, approaching it, you know, a different country, different culture? Were there certain dynamics that were the same, or was it like a whole new world?
That was our first time taking over a congregation we'd only ever pioneered.
Yeah.
So it was definitely different, and especially because it was overseas, and it was a whole new culture. I didn't speak any Mandarin. I don't really speak much now, but but yeah, it was a totally different experience.
Do you remember any like notable things that happened, or just like miracles, or just the fact that, you know, people were getting saved in a place where, you know, that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I think anybody that got saved, anybody new that came in, was a miracle. And you know, to see anybody bring people to church and just be bold, you know, it was a miracle that people will still outreach. You know, the Chinese people will still outreach and go out there and try to win souls, even though it could land them in legal trouble.
Yeah.
That they were willing to do that.
That's so awesome. And every single time that I've seen, I haven't even been there, so I see the videos, I see, you know, the streams and things like that. And it just blows me away, because it's like literally watching what we do here over there.
It really is.
It's powerful. So after being sent as missionaries in China, you guys made your way back in 2021, I believe, right?
Yes.
It was around the time the pandemic ended, was sort of dying down.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so coming back and stepping into a position of, you know, assistant pastors, what was that like? What did you feel? Pressure? Did you feel, you know, like, oh, we got this? Or what was it like?
Pastor Martinez made it easy, and Mama Ceci made it easy. They gave us the confidence that we needed to step in. And Pastor Austin and Tabby made it easy. You know, everything was already set. So it was an easy transition to do.
And so now, how does it feel to be a part of everything that God's doing now? Like, now we're going to a new building, being a conference center, just to see from when you guys came in to now, just simply being a part of it. What are some of the feelings that you feel like, or thoughts?
It's exciting. It's really exciting to be a part of it, to see what God's doing here. We weren't even a conference center when we first came into Ogden, and to be able to be a part of that has been amazing. It's super exciting. It just makes me smile.
So I have one more question that a subscriber sent in. And this question says, what is one thing throughout the years of pastoring that you would tell another pastor's wife about how to keep your heart right and how to deal with people when they hurt you in the church?
Ooh, that's hard.
Because it does happen. You know, even, it sucks to say, but, you know, things happen in church. There's violations. There's, you know, trouble, and people get disgruntled and things like that.
Yeah. I think my biggest thing is that they need to remind themselves that Jesus died for them too, that Jesus loves them. Jesus invited Judas to his table knowing what Judas was going to do. He still died for him. Judas made his own decisions, and God gives us free will, and so people will, and right will always come out right. And so keep your heart right, because if you retaliate, you're not right.
Amen.
But it is hard. It's not an easy thing to do, but to forgive and to remember that Jesus died for you too, and you're not perfect yourself, and you've made mistakes. And sometimes, as humans, we don't even realize when we hurt people. The things that we have done to people, we may not even realize may have been hurtful, and so they may be acting in a hurtful place. And so just to keep hurting each other is not going to make anything better.
Amen.
And Pastor always says to take the higher road. And to see him do that, it makes it easy. When people hurt you, you've seen Pastor do it time and time again. And so it makes it easier just to take the higher road.
Amen. So there's that we covered a lot. I'm very grateful, like I said, for you to be here, to be a part of this.
Well, thank you for asking me to do this.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Before we wrap it up, is there anything else, any stories, any maybe even another like tangent or just maybe conversation route, anything else, shout outs that you'd want to share with the world?
Shout out Jeremiah, my son-in-law. He does podcasts.
Heck yeah.
Well, we never did get into you entering our family,
Oh, yeah,
but that's okay.
No. So there is I wanted to. It's different for me because it's a completely different perspective that I have. I don't have that womanly insight, but we can, because there may be somebody listening where they were also a church kid, raising church kids. What was it like to have that happen? Someone in the church that you saw grow up and be rebellious, pursue your daughter.
Honestly, as a mom, there probably could have never been anybody good enough for my girl. And that's just, just as a mom speaking, not necessarily as, somebody that could look at your life and think, God has changed him. And we saw that, I saw that, that you were saved, and that you love God, and that you were doing your best to serve God. But just from a mom's point of view, there could be never anybody good enough for your kids.
Yeah.
But that's biased and probably not true.
But what better way for it to, happen in church? And
seriously, I couldn't have, asked for anything more, than for God to give my daughter somebody that believes exactly how she does, grew up hearing the same gospel that she did. And what more could I ask for?
Well, anything else you want to share with the world?
Abby really wanted me to share the story about when my dad did my homework. But
it's okay. My Papa Bear did my homework. He helped. I wouldn't have graduated high school without that, man. Not like my wife's giving me the death stare right now. Not like full on like whole essay. He just helped me a ton, and yeah.
He just gave you all the answers.
No, there was one time where kids, don't use this. I won't even share the site. There was a website where it basically it would help you. It would give you answers. Like you could scan a homework or a math problem and something like that. but it would only do so much. You had to buy like a full subscription. And me and my Papa Bear, we were doing packets together. We were like trying to get me to graduate.
Oh,
And
dang.
he was like, "Oh, you have to pay for the whole subscription to get more answers." And we just looked at each other like, I was like, "Oh, should we get it?" And he was like, "Yeah, just buy it. Put my card."
Dang.
Shout out my Papa Bear.
You graduated.
Wouldn't have been here without you.
No, actually, you were asking earlier about if I was, growing up as a church kid, if I ever rebelled. And I didn't necessarily rebel, but it was just by God's grace. I knew that in my heart, if I had the opportunity, I probably would have rebelled outright. I remember walking home from school, and I was with a group of friends, and they were all talking about a party that they were going to that weekend. And they basically told me that they weren't going to invite me because I was a church kid. I was a church girl. And I felt so rejected and so upset. So after, they went their separate ways, I was just so angry at God. And I told God, I wish I never knew you. I wish my parents weren't saved. And, as I look back on that, I could remember it so clearly, but it's a miracle that God didn't strike me dead, because I had such a good upbringing. My parents, prayed for me and protected me from the world, and God protected me. And there I was, so ungrateful, just wanted to be a part of the world and be accepted by the world. I was so naive and so dumb.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things, I didn't outright rebel, but in my heart, I wanted to. And had I been given the opportunity, I probably would have, but it was the grace of God.
Yeah, it's so it's such an interesting topic, because anytime I've talked with people about it, it's just the fact that the world, sin, I think just the mysteriousness of it, things like, being in a relationship, or like, what's it like to drink or smoke, like just
It looks so
the
good.
glamorousness of it,
They always look like they were having fun. And
yeah. The podcast I did with Chubbs, he says, it looks like you're, stepping into a life of freedom, and like, no rules, no taboos or regulations, but really you're just stepping into bondage. You're stepping into.
It's crazy, the perception that you have, but the reality of it is that you are stepping into bondage, into sin, into addictions. But I also remember at that time I was so lonely. It was like it was during middle school, and I began to desire the world, and I was so sad and depressed, and I didn't understand why, but it was because I think I was longing for the world, and I stopped seeking God, and it was I remember it as a dark time in my life, until I finally really gave my life to God.
Yeah.
And answered an altar call.
It just kind of reminds me of what I was saying earlier. Like, when you really like reflect and think about everything, even from the very beginning to like upbringing and things like that, it just makes you realize how good and great God really is, because of everything that He's brought you through, every little experience, trial, and to where, it's almost like at times it's like a roller coaster, but eventually, there's a place that, where you win, and you're blessed, you're married, you're in ministry, and
and really you could only give glory to God. You can't take any of it, because it was all God. Just, being human and knowing, that my heart was deceitfully wicked. I have one funny story to share.
Yeah, go ahead. It's all on the table.
So, at that time, I remember I was in art class, and everybody's just doing their art and talking, among themselves, and I decided that day I was going to try to fit in. So I said a curse word.
You're like,
but it
frick.
was so awkward coming out of my mouth that the whole class stopped and looked at me. I was so mad. Like, I couldn't even curse right. I never tried that again.
That's so funny.
Oh, yeah. But so it was definitely God's hand of grace on my life. And I thank God for it, because if I had been left to myself, look at what I was already trying to fit in. I was already trying, and I was so dumb and awkward, but I was already ruined for God. I already had a conviction. I already had, I knew I was already set apart, and I couldn't fit in. I knew that, and I tried anyways, and it didn't work.
Yeah. It's just super cool. I mean, my mind is just still stuck on the, just reflecting, from the very beginning to the present. But once again, very grateful for you to come and be a part of this, Miss Monica. I just want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having
being
me.
such a great example in the Ogden congregation, not only to married couples, myself and my wife, but just to the women in the congregation. We appreciate it and we love you.
Thanks.
But for everybody listening, we'll catch you guys on the next one.